really welcome you all here on the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. It's an auspicious number and an auspicious day. Clearly would have loved to have had this event in person, but honestly, the chance to be able to bring people from around the world together using this technology, it's really attractive. And, um, and I think it's lovely to have Earth Day celebrated at this global level when we think about, this beautiful blue marble that we're all living on and can really enjoy and appreciate its own glory and the glory of all of its inhabitants. So um, we're here today for us to talk about pollution, Pure Earth's work on pollution. To answer questions around COVID, we have one of the top experts on COVID to talk about, and specifically to look at some of our program work in India and lead, and I'll introduce that in a minute. But for those of you who don't know that much about Pure Earth, let me give you a little introduction on Pure Earth and what it does. So rather than, as we normally do, jump straight into all kinds of data and technical details, I thought perhaps it might be useful for me to talk a little bit about how Pure Earth started, because I'm the founder of this organization. And it started with me leaving Australia after a successful business career there, working for IBM, and deciding I wanted to do something productive and philanthropic, if you like, or something that was contributive to the world. And I spent a year in the rainforest trying to work out how to protect the rainforest at the time. This is 1989. I was much thinner at the time. And I spent some time running up and down the rainforests in Amazonas, designing extractive reserves, designing these pieces of park that could not then be deforested. And I put quite a few of them in design, and they were passed in law. So it was a very effective way to protect some of the rainforest. But after a year of that work, I left. It was really a hostile environment in many ways. And I ended up in New York, now quite penniless. And so I started a business that I named after the rainforest. I called it Great Forest, La Grande Floresta was the name of the Amazon. And that did and still does sustainability consulting. It helps large companies and buildings to do recycling, to do energy efficiency, to manage the metrics around their environmental performance. And our first office was on the 50th floor of the Empire State Building. So this picture is very pertinent for me. And that company flourished and did very well. But after a while, I felt I needed really to go back and do more contributive work. And so starting around the turn of the millennium, with some friends, started to travel into different places, specifically to look at pollution. So in Cambodia, we looked at landfills and rag pickers and children working on landfills. We also traveled to India. In fact, Jack Caravanos will present a little bit, and I went and looked at industrial waste in India. And this is a kid playing on some acutely toxic land here in the western part in Gujarat. And then also traveled to parts of Africa. This particular location in Zambia is one of the most toxic places I'd ever been to. It's filled with lead. This is a lead slag heap that stretches for many dozens of acres. And the whole town is actually heavily contaminated with lead. And other places like this. In China, we traveled around looking at these highly polluting industries that went everywhere. So all of that early work in Pure Earth led to where we are now, to really focus our efforts on reducing pollution where it harms human health. And so we started in 1999, but after 4 or 5 years of exploration, we've now focused very specifically on toxins and health, and especially as it relates to children. And what we've also elected to do is to work very much on pragmatic projects. We want to fix problems, not just talk about them. We really want to go in and solve a problem and know that the community is safe after we've done our work. And we've been doing that now for 20 years with, I think, 100 projects so far and many, many more in our future. And to support that work, we've also been doing some work on advocacy and awareness at a very technical level. So, for example, we're the people behind the recent Lancet Commission on Pollution and Health. And allow me just a few slides of some of the details around pollution from that report, just to give you an understanding of the size of this particular issue. So if I can first show you that in terms of death, people dying because they're exposed to pollution, it's a real big deal. It's 9 million deaths, which is 1 in 6 deaths in the world actually is from contaminated soil or water or air. And, you know, compared to COVID, which is likely to kill perhaps 500,000 people, compared to smoking, which is 7 million people, HIV, malaria, tuberculosis, 3 million. Pollution really is, you know, this big issue that doesn't really have the attention that it deserves. So the work that we're doing is kind of critical to that, and necessarily focused in the places where pollution is worse. And here you can see it's the low and middle income countries where pollution really is doing the most damage. So I think that's, so one other critical point to know about toxins is like pandemics, they don't stay localized. Pollution spreads either in the air, blowing across national borders, blowing even across the Atlantic. From China, there's air pollution in the West Coast, or in food and products. A lot of contaminated materials from contaminated locations in the low and middle income countries end up in the West and are a risk to all of us globally. So that link, I think, association with what we're seeing right now is kind of pertinent. So very short background on Pure Earth and what we're trying to do. This morning, for this breakfast seminar, we'll first talk a little with Pramila Sharma, who's in Delhi right now, and hi to you there. It's lovely to see you. And hear a little bit about lead. And then we'll turn over to Jack Caravanos, who's really one of the New York's leading experts on COVID. And then we can do a Q&A after that. And for questions, if you do have any questions, do pop them into the chat box. And I see, no, I'm sorry, the Q&A box. Just type them in there and we'll be able to get to those after we've heard from Jack. And then we'll finish with Carol at the end as well. So before I turn over to Pramila, I just want to give you a few bits and pieces about lead. Lead, you know it's bad because of Flint, Michigan, but it's much worse than that when we start to dig into the numbers. First of all, lead is responsible for 1 million deaths every year. Again, much more than COVID. And these are cardiovascular deaths, people who are dying because of increased risk of heart attack that lead brings. So they're dying before their time. We also have some new research coming out soon that shows that almost a third of all the children in the world have lead poisoning. They have lead in them from lead exposures, and we'll hear about those in a second, and are above the WHO level that's considered the action level. So, this is an area that's enormous, that needs an enormous amount of attention, and where perhaps the best I can do is to show you how we're trying to deal with this issue by turning over to Pramila in Delhi. And I think before we'll start with a short video as an explainer, and then we'll go to Pramila. So Jen, over to you with the video. I don't have any audio on this. Jen, I don't have audio here. Does everyone else have audio?
Okay, I'm going to try unmuting myself, and hopefully that will add.
It might be your mute that does it. So start it up again, and we'll try it then. Yes, very good.
The process looks like this typically. It's done in a backyard. They'll take a battery, they'll take an axe to it, they'll chop the top, kind of rip open the top of the battery, they'll dump out the acid, typically just on the dirt, and then they'll remove the plates and essentially remelt them down in an open furnace. And the process releases lead dust. And lead dust is particularly dangerous to children, and it's particularly dangerous when it's done in residential communities where kids are playing all day, where pregnant mothers are. It is the #1 pollution source that we identify in the world. The informal recycling of these takes place in every city, in every low and middle income country, with very few exceptions. If you and I saw these batteries, we would call them all car batteries. In fact, they do not all go in cars. Anytime that there is a cell tower, at the base of that tower is a stack of 10 or 50 of these batteries. And then in a lot of countries that experience power outages, every family will have a small stack of these batteries as just simply backup power. And the reason that this informal recycling is so prevalent in so many communities is because lead is quite valuable now. And the process of removing the lead from these batteries and melting it back into bars to sell to battery manufacturers is not one that requires any particular education or training. If you're doing this out of subsistence, if this is your only choice for feeding your family, and you're not aware of the risks that you're creating, then it makes sense, from an individual standpoint to do this. All it takes is a little bit of knowledge about batteries and what's inside them and the health effects of lead, and then, your daily life of seeing this process to put 2 and 2 together and say, there's a problem here.
Thank you, Jen. And as you can see, in low and middle income countries, the main source of exposure to lead is not from pipes as it is in Flint, or from paint as it is in the East Coast of the US. It's from informal recycling of car batteries, and also how that material, having been recycled, often ends up in pottery or spices or foodstuffs. So one of our best experts in this is Pramila Sharma in Delhi. And Pramila, I turn the floor to you.
Thank you, Richard. Greetings of the day, everyone. We started working in India in 2002 or 3 with the objective of solving point source industrial pollution problems impacting the lives of children and women, the most vulnerable groups in any community. We now know, and our industry partners also confirm, that more than 50% of India's used batteries are recycled in the backyard, contaminating residential areas with the most unsafe and crude methods of recycling that they do. Hence, for the last few years, we have been working with focus mainly on lead pollution from the informal sector. Before addressing any problem, it is imperative to first understand the scale of the problem. And for that, we have trained about 40 investigators into a simple and rapid risk assessment protocol developed by us. We have identified and screened about 600 plus contaminated hotspots, including 250 plus lead contaminated hotspots. The blue dots on this map that you can see is the geographical spread of those hotspots in country. And from these 250 plus hotspots, we have estimated about 2 million people at risk of exposure via inhalation and ingestion of lead dust. And then there are several hundred of others that we have not assessed yet. Before designing any intervention at any site, our assessment work include testing the soils in the residential areas, fields, using a portable device that you can see called XRF, and we conduct blood tests to ascertain any public exposures in the local community. Next, please. Our cleanup interventions typically include cleaning up of contaminated schools, houses, capping or covering of contaminated playgrounds, lanes to contain exposure pathways, involving and motivating the respected members of the community, such as a school principal in the second pic that you can see. We design our community awareness program to educate general public of the dangers of posed by this pollutant and such activities in the residential area. It is important to stop the reemergence of such activities once stopped by our efforts. Next, please. Engaging with urban local bodies such as municipalities is crucial as well. And in Bihar, in Eastern India, where we successfully completed our first lead cleanup project, we involved the mayor of the city, Patna city, right from the start of the project. And once the interventions are complete, the sites are monitored, the soil levels and again the blood of the kids are tested again to evaluate for the impact on success of the interventions. Next, please. We work very collaboratively with all stakeholders, including the national and state level government, industry partners, informal polluters, academic institutions, grassroots NGOs, and local leaders, and organize training and provide technical assistance to them on the existing rules and laws to comply with, and educate them on the best practices on the environmental safe management of the operations, safety, hygiene, etc. We engage very strategically with the state level environmental agencies and conduct workshops on the use and application of a tool for their inspectors to use when they go out to monitor and inspect the formal recyclers. Incidentally, one such training for the Tamil Nadu Pollution Control Board, as we call them here, help the agency to identify one polluting unit in the city of Vellore. And now we are working with them and designing the cleanup of the school and residential colony nearby, as well as advising the industry in careful dismantling, handling of tons of waste which is lying over there, and remediation of its premises. Next, please. We are also engaged with the informal recyclers that you might have seen in the video. In Bihar, we are organizing them as a cooperative group and linking them with the state government existence policy to develop as a collection center or cluster them together in some industrial area. We believe that if this trial is successful, this would be a model for bringing those informal recyclers into the mainstream business, as we really don't want to take away their livelihoods. Next. Lancet report, that Richard mentioned earlier was presented in Delhi also when it was launched. And it was very well received by the government as well as academia here in India. It has brought a lot of focused attention on pollution issues since then, particularly the lead pollution, which was largely unseen and underestimated then in terms of its impact beyond mortality, which we know that the neurological and irreversible mental development damages in the future generations. The most influential government think tank known as Niti Aayog invited us to a meeting convened for multiple ministries in the government, and this concluded with the drafting of a national program for lead pollution in India. And we have been able to establish ourselves as an incredible and reliable resource partners, advising them, national as well as state government, in implementing this program. Next, please. Moving forward, as the momentum has been set in India, and we know that our government is currently revising the existing rules and has called for public input on the draft Battery Waste Management Rules 2020, and we have submitted our inputs. It is mainly to do away with the informal recyclers and ensuring that the informally recycled lead doesn't enter into the supply chains of formal, and also suggesting economically viable incentivization of formal complying industries. We also plan to continue our statewide programs in Bihar and Tamil Nadu to assess the extent and other sources of pollution, lead pollution. Measures to measure baseline blood lead in kids, continue cleaning up of high-risk sites, and build institutional capacities to monitor health, supply chains, and enforce policies. These programs provide the model to roll out nationally in the future. We are also exploring public education campaigns to spur additional action on pollution, and also we are working with upgradation of formal smelters with cleaner technologies as per International Lead Association and Basel technical standards to reduce emissions significantly. Next, please. And as I close, I would like to share an update on COVID-19 in India so far. India has imposed a nationwide lockdown on March 24th, and it's been extended till May 3rd. And this lockdown, you might have heard that, forced hundreds of thousands of migrant workers to flee the city. However, this proactive and timely action by our government is being lauded for keeping the number of infected people low so far, as this could have been the only feasible way to enforce social distancing in a country of about 1.3 billion people. Amidst all these uncertainties, we in India are foreseeing our ongoing work getting impacted, and are expecting certain delays in our scheduled cleanups in Tamil Nadu, for example, and other work with government as well as industry. Thank you.
Pramila, thank you very much. That's wonderful to see, and it's so wonderful to see so many good programs. You know, when we think about clean air now available to hundreds of millions of kids in Delhi and in other cities, it's just a shame that it's counterbalanced by such an awful problem on the other side. And we're all thinking, how can we keep the clean air and then not have to worry about COVID at the same time? So
I agree. This is actually nature's way of, forced detoxification that way.
Forced detoxification. I like that. That's a good way to put it. And of course, the lead issue, this unseen toxin that affects in so many pernicious ways. One of the things that really disturbs me dramatically is how it impacts intelligence, and the levels that we're seeing out there kind of point to a third of all of India having lost 4 or 5 IQ points overall. And the impact of that economically is just absurd. So our work there is at the early stages, but we've got the right platform. So I hope we can just expand and continue it as much as possible in the coming decades. So thank you, Pramila, very much. Let me turn over now to Dr. Karavanos. He's our Director of Research, and he's also a professor at NYU and an expert in COVID, as well as in other toxic issues internationally. And he and I have traveled a great number of places. But Jack, can I let you please give us an update on COVID, especially here in New York City?
Yes, thank you, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. Even though we're in the epicenter here in New York, it is a wonderful day. It's Earth Day, so we're very, very happy and excited. And some of these gains that Pramila mentioned, we're just hoping they're sustainable. I also want to thank Rich for taking me to India, 12 years ago, when Pramila was pregnant with her little boy. I remember those days. But let me bring you up to date on a couple of different items. First, I want to go over some disease rates regarding COVID. And I think I'll start globally and then focus in on New York, the New York situation here. And we see some good news. All these curves are showing sort of a normal distribution, the downward trend in Germany and in Peru, China, of course, way down, and Madagascar. Keep in mind that the ordinates on the left are sometimes in dozens or thousands. So you see here in Germany, it's 8,000 cases a day in some of these places. Looking to other areas, we see Mexico, Turkey, Kenya are still possibly struggling, where the public health experts are monitoring that, and everybody's learning from everybody else, what works, what doesn't work, and how we should change. But you will notice a very cautious progression in all of this. India, it was nice to hear from Pramila that things are a little better in India, and we're hoping to see that spread throughout the continent. Going to the New York situation, in the theme here of the Empire State Building, by the way. Thank you, Rich, for doing that. I want to show you what's going on in New York. And in New York, you see here that the numbers are drastically down. These are cases, 134,000 cases in New York. New York's a population of 8 million. And it's just wonderful that just the other day, we came to a record low. If you're wondering what these dips are, these dips here, these are weekends. So the number of cases does not go down on weekend, but the reporting goes down. And then, of course, it spikes up. If you look at fatalities, which is a sadder part of the picture, we see a rapid decrease. And this rapid decrease from the middle of April is because of our social distancing, our hand washing, our not touching our faces, wearing N95 respirators. And it shows that things can work. And this is a very good positive number. By the way, 14,000 people today, up to 14,000 have perished in New York. That's 10% about of the overall cases. And the reason is primarily because these are older people. And when you look at the maps of who's perishing, unfortunately, in New York City, you'll see it is in some of the older communities and the poorer communities. So it's a combination of poor communities that don't have access to health care, living in very poor conditions in New York. We do have that. Every city has that, as well as elderly population. So you have a family of 6 people living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Flushing, and of course, contagion is so probable. This is, for us, one of the most significant aspects. It's not just poverty and age, but it's also, are you healthy? And that brings us to a theme of today, staying healthy. And you see here that 82% of the people, as of this date, that perished in New York had one or more diseases. And the shocking one is hypertension. As a matter of fact, when you look at these, everything here with an orange arrow is environmentally linked. And we all know that hypertension, Pramila can tell you this, and Drew can tell you this, and of course Rich, is related to lead poisoning. So if you have one of these or more than one of these, the probability is so much higher. That's why staying healthy is a message we want to really send out. So what about environmental improvement? it's phenomenal. And to hear Pramila say that the Ganges with some chlorination is drinkable, I feel like I need to fly there and do this before that window closes, and maybe even swim in the Grand Canal in Venice. Look at these images, which I think shocked many environmental scientists, not realizing that a change so quickly can show such positive improvement. It actually caught me by surprise to think that 2 weeks of scaling down, and look what we have. Of course, you've seen images of air pollution from Milan a year before the epidemic and a year after. And of course, keep in mind that a lot of disease has been caused by air pollution in the past. So what you have is this short window of no air pollution is really, it's tiny compared to the decades and decades of exposure to air pollution. So I hear sometimes, isn't it true that the reduction in air pollution will save lives? But the reality is, when you balance out years of pollution and damage versus a very short period in time, it's not quite true. And of course, focusing on the India theme, I've been to Delhi many times, and I know what the sky looks like. And to see a blue sky like that, as displayed here in a Guardian article, was just amazing. Pramila, keep taking those pictures because again, that may change soon enough, but let's hope not. China has some good and bad news. You'll see here from January 19th all the way to March 8th, things got much cleaner. Particulates are way down, disease goes down. However, notice how it's slowly coming back. March 1, March 8th. So as China recovers, how much of those reductions will be sustained? And I'm afraid to say, probably not too many. So putting this all together, what we have is, of course, pollution. We know pollution causes disease. This is indisputable. And what we've learned is having disease produces susceptibility. And of course, COVID is now proving that. So by us reducing pollution, it benefits all the way down the chain. We don't want people with chronic disease, hypertension, COPD. This is absolutely not what we want. And when you look at who is hurt, the very vulnerable, the informal sector, we're struggling so hard to get these informal lead recyclers formalized. And what you see here in the Middle East of people burning cables to recover the copper, the cables have lead in them. And these kids are playing in lead contaminated soil, and we measured their blood, and it's why measure it anymore? Because we know it. As well as people literally living at Bembes landfill in Senegal, where you have entire populations, thousands of people recycling. And these are the first people to fail, and they are failing, and I'm sorry to say they are perishing because of this virus. They don't have that health care. So that was a quick, brief overview of sort of COVID and how it relates to some of our work. We're struggling with some of these challenges, but also it is energizing many of us to sort of process all this. So thank you very much, and back to you. Back to you, Jen. Let me just.
Thanks, Jack. That's great. Very, very good. So what I'd like to do now is to put it open for questions. And again, we have one question here that I'll get to in a second, but it's also great to make use of Jack for questions you might have related to minimizing exposures to COVID. He's been on every news service here in New York you can think of, and in the press, talking about how to minimize, how to manage living in these particular circumstances. So if you have any questions around that issue, I highly recommend you put them in the Q&A. We've got one question here from Tabasum. Thank you very much. Have you been speaking to the auto and battery manufacturers, and what can they do to help resolve this problem? Yeah, this is a terrific question. This is absolutely central to the solution globally around all of this. The formal lead industry, especially the larger players, recycle car batteries in a very clean way. More than 99% of a car battery is recyclable, and in the plants that are operated by the top of the field, not the informal, but the top of the field guys, they are in fact very clean and very effective at minimizing any releases to the environment. So we want to find the rest of the world getting to that level, and the businesses are critical to help to do that. So we've had long conversations with groups representing the battery industry, representing the lead industry as well, ILA, ILMC, ILZDM in India and the like. And they've really been very responsive and terrific, and some are even looking to provide some support to these sort of actions as it goes forward. So they have so far been a really great response. So I hope that answers the question, Tabasum. There's a question for Pramila from Booty. Pramila, can you read it, or shall I read it for you?
I can read that, yes. So thanks, Puri. So far, what has worked in India is that we took a little time to, build that rapport with the informal recyclers, because these recyclers are of very, very, small scale, and in the last couple of years, what has happened is that the demand of local batteries has also reduced. So these guys are also facing some challenges, with in terms of making livelihood with that. So so they are so far liking this idea, and we are right now still at the level of looking at the feasibility of what would work better. Acting as a collection center, or working together as a recycling unit in some designated industrial area. So so far we are right at the very beginning of this process. Going forward, I'll share with you how it goes on.
Thank you, Pramila, and thank you, Booty, for that question. It is critical to work out how the informal sector can be gainfully employed as the process moves forward. And I think lessons learned coming up soon in Indonesia, we will look to translate into programs in other countries, of course. So let's all hold hands as we go through this process in parallel countries. Guy Loftus has a question here. What's the biggest challenge that we have in raising awareness for the lead acid battery problem? So this is another great question, because few people are aware of the scope of this particular issue, because lead is this pernicious, quiet background problem. You don't, get lead poisoned and then start frothing at the mouth or have to go to hospital. Instead, it just impacts you in subtle but horrible ways and reduces your lifespan or your intelligence, or leads you to become more violent too. So if we were to really think about, what's been lacking, we just haven't had a loud enough megaphone to let people know about the scope of this issue, and so really it's funding. If we had more money to be able to go out and talk louder about this issue, we'll be able to get more attention, because I think it's the loud voice that ends up bringing the most attention to it. So that's the short and easy answer to all of these problems out there is funding. But I think for us, if we can bring the proper science to the right people, especially to bilateral donors, they'll realize how impactful this one particular issue is. And more important, this is a problem that has a cohesive solution. This is not like climate change, where you need to fight half of industry to really make a change, half of the world's industry. This is something that already has the industry that makes use of this material broadly supporting the work that needs to happen. So there's a lot of win-win to be had here. And I do think the that as we move forward in this issue, we will be able to turn back and have made an enormous difference to billions and billions of people on the planet. Okay, over to Lara. Lara asks, what's the key for the Indian government to take on and complement Pure Earth's work on lead? Pramila, do you want to have a first shot at that? And I can add stuff into as well.
Sure, please. So it's actually both ways, Lara. So when we were, when the government of India was in the process of, drafting this program, we were a part of, that plan. And I think that's gave us an insight also to work in those lines. So this is actually a mutual work which is going on.
Yeah, and, the Indian government, once they are well educated, they have been terribly responsive to this. The Indian government also is not a cohesive single unit. There are so many different agencies in so many different places that need to be educated. So there's a long way to go still until this becomes an actual substantive priority for the government of India as a whole, but it's at least partially along the way. Would you say, Pramila?
That's right.
A good question from Raymond. In India, what have we done to sustain our interventions after the life of the project?
The key component is, we have developed adequate capacities in our local partners, with the government, and of course the local community members that, they are monitoring and carrying forward the work. I would say that.
Yeah, and our broad methodology in any place is that first we really rely on local partners to do most of the implementation work. We're quite a small agency, but we like to make sure that we're developing and encouraging local universities, NGOs and community organizations, and municipal and local governments, and helping them to do the work that's necessary to solve the issue. So, and that I think is where we end up ensuring sustainability in this work. So one more question, and I'll pass over to Carol. Olivia asks, are there alternative types of metal or material that could be used in batteries instead of lead? And I wanted to get to this one because it's quite important to know that, in fact, the lead acid battery looks like it's here to stay. So let me tell you two things about that. First of all, as we move to electric cars, you would think we no longer need so many lead acid batteries. The answer is, unfortunately, every electric car still has the lead acid battery in it. And the reason is that it's needed because the batteries in an electric car tend to fail rather abruptly. So if you're driving down the thruway in your Tesla and the batteries fail, you need to have some power that's there as a backup so that you won't crash. And as well, lead acid batteries, they function at low temperatures when other types of batteries don't function. So a lot of people are looking for an alternate to this technology, but it doesn't look like there's anything right now, even on the mid to long-term horizon, that will replace this ancient but very durable technology at the moment. I wish there were, but unfortunately, we just can't see anything out there from being looking at this for quite some time. Any more questions? Carol, shall I be turning over to you now?
Yes.
All right. So any more questions, we can come back later, but I think are we supposed to be finishing at 9:15? We are, right?
Yes,
okay,
we
so
are.
we're already gone over time. So my humble
Yeah.
apologies.
Well,
so let's pass over to Carol then, our fantastic development leader in New York, who's just been super. I want to thank you and your team for organizing all of this right now. It's just been terrific. And let me give you the floor, Carol. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, we hope everybody learned a lot today on, you know, our goal at Pure Earth is to really be a catalyst for change. And I think you got a feel for that just hearing about the important work that Pramila and team are doing. You know, we pilot solutions, we show a proof of concept, we build capacity. And then the hope is that we leverage buy-in and the government and industry scale it up. And dollars and support from you help us do that leverage. We really want you all to keep on learning. We have a lot of events in person, not so soon, but eventually we'll be having our dirty talks with Pure Earth, and we hope that you'll, you know, attend those. And if for the companies out there, we can host those at your offices. Donating is really an important way, and I'm trying to see if I can get these slides to work. There we go. Let's see here. There we go. There's a gift of any amount really does make a difference. $1,000, you can help us clean up a contaminated site. You can help us clean up homes, and you can help us monitor those blood lead levels of those kids and families that Pramila was showing in her slides. And it's very easy. It's pureearth.org and donate. And in fact, Jen is going to be putting in the chat room a link for you guys to just do it as we speak or right after we hang up. And we are so grateful. Our board has set up a matching fund, and they will match your gifts dollar for dollar. So it's really, you know, worth so much today. And we deeply appreciate anything that you can do. We also have some future events. We have our big benefit bash on June 29th. It's going to happen, rain, shine, hopefully in person at the Edison Ballroom. Maybe it will be virtual, but it's going to be an inspiring program. It's going to be fun. Mark your calendars. We're also going to have online auction. We have a responsibly sourced gold jewelry auction, just fantastic. This is one of the pieces that was donated last year by Futura Jewelry, just specially designed, and folks can bid online. And we're gonna be doing something really cool. We're gonna have globes designed by artists, and these are their depictions of a pure earth. This is from Senegal. Kimo made this beautiful globe, and also opportunities for that. So listen, we thank you so much for learning and being with us, and we're going to have 2 more sessions, one at 12:30, and that's going to talk about Peru and the important programming we're doing to preserve the rainforest and stop mercury pollution, and then learn more at our cocktail hour at 5, where we'll be talking about Africa, and you'll also hear more from Jack and Rich. And that's our program for today. And thank you again for coming, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Lovely to see you all. Have a safe and delightful day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.